My job is to see what others miss. Not the way light falls on a cheekbone, revealing a truth someone is trying to hide. Not the way a politician's smile doesn't reach their eyes. Not the way a woman in a perfect silk dress holds her hands so tight, her knuckles turn white. My camera captures moments. I capture truths. But with Aveline Hayes, the truth became my problem. Not because she was a liar, because the contract I signed forced me to be one. For those of you who are new here, I'm so glad you found us. To be completely transparent, our previous channel was taken down without warning. We're starting again from scratch. Your support right now means more than it ever has before. So please, take a second to hit that subscribe button. It's the single most powerful way you can help us rebuild. I love thinking about where these stories travel. Let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Alright, enough talking. Let's start at the beginning. The air in the lawyer's office tasted like money and non-disclosure agreements. Across the polished mahogany table sat Arthur Vance, a man who looked like he ironed his soul every morning. And next to him, Aveline Hayes. Her dress was the color of a winter sky. Her posture was a fortress. She didn't look at me. She looked through me. Vance slid a document across the table. It was an inch thick. The Public Image Enhancement Agreement. I didn't need to read it. He'd already explained the deal on the phone. Her father, the governor. His Senate race. The photo of Aveline leaving a bar called the Siren's Kiss. A problem. I was the solution. I picked up the contract. My eyes scanned the clauses. Clause 4A. All public displays of affection will be choreographed and pre-approved. Clause 7C. No unsanctioned physical contact. Clause 12. A list of approved topics for conversation. My favorite color was now navy blue. My favorite movie was a black and white classic I'd never seen. It wasn't a relationship agreement. It was a list of acquisitions. My life, my image, my time. For 30 days. For a price that would change everything for me. Aveline finally spoke. Her voice was low, steady, like ice freezing over a deep lake. Mr. Vance explained the situation. I just nodded. I need a girlfriend, she said. The words clipped. Not a friend. Not a confidant. An employee. Are we clear, Miss Ryder? I met her gaze for the first time. Her eyes were gray, the color of a storm gathering over the ocean. And in them I saw it. The thing my camera always found. The truth. She was terrified. I picked up the pen. And I signed my name. 3 nights later, I was at the Metropolitan Charity Gala. Borrowed dress. Borrowed pearls. Borrowed life. Aveline moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. She smiled. She laughed. She tilted her head just so. Every move was perfect. Every word was rehearsed. I was her prop. The girlfriend accessory. My job was to stand a respectful half-step behind her and look adoring. My camera hand twitched. I saw 1,000 photos. The shadow of a champagne flute on a politician's forced smile. The desperate hope in the eyes of a young artist trying to find a patron. The way Aveline's mask slipped for a fraction of a second when she thought no one was looking. Then they came. The flash of cameras, like a sudden burst of lightning. The press had found us. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the performance. Aveline didn't miss a beat. She turned, her movement fluid, and her hand found the small of my back. Her touch was light, professional, but it burned right through the silk of my dress. She leaned in, her lips impossibly close to my ear. The crowd, the cameras, they all faded away until all I could hear was her breath. All I could smell was her perfume, something clean and expensive, like rain on cold stone. Her voice was a low, urgent command. A whisper meant only for me. Smile like you mean it, Ryder. You're being paid to. I turned to the cameras, and I smiled. My heart was still hammering, but for the first time, I wasn't sure if it was for the camera or for her. The second rule of faking a relationship, spontaneity, is a myth. Every candid laugh is rehearsed. Every stolen kiss is scheduled. Every private moment has an audience of one, the man with the checklist. My life had become a series of call sheets. 9 a.m., hand-holding, location Greenwich Park. 11:30 a.m., shared laughter over coffee, the corner perk. And my least favorite, 1 p.m., the just another couple in love walk home. Arthur Vance, the man who ironed his soul, handed me a tablet. On the screen was a map. A red line snaked through 3 city blocks. Our route. The paparazzi have been tipped, Vance said, his eyes on the road. They'll be near the bookstore on Lexington. We want a 2-shot. You'll be laughing at something she says. I looked over at Aveline. She was staring out the window, her reflection a pale ghost against the passing city. She hadn't spoken a word all morning. What am I laughing at? I asked. Aveline turned from the window. Her gray eyes were flat, empty. I'll tell you about a time my brother fell into a fountain, she said, her voice a monotone. It's a family-friendly, pre-approved anecdote. I wanted to scream, to tell her I wasn't a machine, to ask her if any part of her was still real. But I just nodded. The contract was the contract. The autumn air was crisp. We walked. The red line on Vance's map burned in my memory. As we neared the bookstore, Aveline's hand found mine. Her fingers were ice cold. Her grip was purely mechanical. No pressure. No quotums. A business transaction. My brother was 7, she began, her voice loud enough to be overheard. He was trying to impress a girl. I felt the shift in the air before I saw them. The slight change in the crowd's movement. The almost silent click of a long focus lens. They were here. Aveline finished her story. I laughed on cue. I tilted my head, letting my hair fall across my shoulder, just like Vance had shown me. I looked at her, my smile wide and fake and perfect. But my photographers, I caught something. Not the hired paparazzi across the street. Someone else. A woman with a reporter's notebook and eyes that were too sharp. Too hungry. Jenna Slate. A political shark who smelled blood in the water. She was walking right toward us. This wasn't on the call sheet. Aveline. Cassia, she called out, her voice friendly, but her smile all teeth. You two look wonderful together. Aveline's hand tightened in mine. This time, it wasn't mechanical. It was panic. Just enjoying the day, Jenna. Aveline said, her voice tight. Jenna's eyes landed on me. Cassia, she said. I'm a huge admirer of your work. That series on urban decay was breathtaking. I have to ask. She paused, letting the silence hang. Aveline tells us you two have so much in common. So, what's the one photograph you've taken that she connects with the most? The world stopped. Aveline froze. Her perfect mask shattered. There was no pre-approved anecdote for this. This was real. The reporter knew it. I knew it. And Aveline knew she was caught. I saw the flicker of sheer terror in her eyes. And something in me snapped. Not the employee. Not the prop. Me. I took a step forward, putting myself slightly in front of Aveline. My hand was still in hers, and I gave it a reassuring squeeze. I smiled at Jenna, a real smile this time. Confident. Easy. That's an easy one, I said, my voice smooth. It's not one of my public pieces. It's a candid shot I took of her a few weeks ago. I felt Aveline flinch. She was reading in the garden. I continued, inventing the memory out of thin air. The afternoon light was hitting her just right, and she had this tiny, secret smile on her face. She hates the photo, thinks it makes her look too soft. I looked back at Aveline, my expression full of fake adoration. But to me, it's the most honest picture I've ever taken. It's the real her, and it's my favorite. Jenna Slate was good, but I was better. I didn't just create images. I created truths. She scribbled in her notebook, her shark-like smile faltering. She'd lost. She offered a quick goodbye and melted back into the crowd. We stood there for a moment, the sound of the city rushing back in. Aveline's hand was still wrapped in mine. Her grip was no longer cold. We didn't speak in the car. We didn't speak in the elevator. Back in the gilded cage of her apartment, she walked to the window, her back to me. The silence was different now. It wasn't hostile. It was heavy, charged. I thought she was going to reprimand me for breaking protocol, for speaking for her, for inventing a memory. Instead, she spoke, her voice, so quiet I almost missed it. Which series? I blinked. What? She turned from the window. Her gray eyes weren't empty anymore. They were watching me, really seeing me. The series Jenna mentioned. Aveline said. Urban Decay. I'd like to see it. There are two ways to see a person. The way they present themselves to the world.
Polished.
Rehearsed. A carefully constructed image. And the way they are when they think no one is looking. For weeks, I'd only seen the first Aveline Hayes. The Fortress. The Ice Queen. The Contract. But when she asked to see my photographs, she wasn't issuing a command. It was an invitation. A request to see past the performance. To see me. I pulled up my private portfolio on my tablet. Not the sanitized version on my website. The real one. The one with the ghosts and the grit. My hands felt unsteady. This was more intimate than any of the fake kisses we'd choreographed. This was my soul, digitized and displayed on a 12-inch screen. I handed her the tablet. Our fingers brushed. This time, I was the one who flinched. She took it and sat on the edge of the sprawling white sofa. I remained standing a few feet away, feeling more exposed than I had in my life. My heart pounded a nervous rhythm against my ribs.
She didn't speak.
She just looked. The first few photos were from the Urban Decay series. A forgotten child's shoe in the dirt of a demolished tenement building. The ghostly imprint of a crucifix on a sun-bleached wall where a home used to be. The defiant bloom of a single red flower pushing through a crack in the pavement. My work wasn't about ruin. It was about what survives. I watched her face. Her mask was gone, replaced by a quiet, intense concentration. Her brow furrowed slightly. Her lips parted. She wasn't just seeing images. She was reading stories. She swiped past the public series. Into my private collection. Things I'd never shown anyone. A portrait of an old man in a jazz club, his eyes closed, lost in the music, the lines on his face a map of his entire life. A shot of two young women arguing on a subway platform, their faces a mirror of anger and love and heartbreak. She stopped on one. A photo I took late one night from my own apartment window. A single light on in the building across the street. Inside, a solitary figure, silhouetted, just staring out at the rain. A portrait of loneliness, so profound it ached. She looked at that one for a long time. A full minute passed. The only sound was the rain beginning to tap against the penthouse windows. Then, she looked up at me. Her gray eyes were different.
Softer. Deeper.
Like the storm had finally broken. This one, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She held up the tablet, pointing to the photo of the lonely figure in the window. I feel this one. My breath caught in my throat. Of all the photos, all the art, all the technique.
She saw the one that felt like me.
The one that felt like her. Why do you do it? She asked, her gaze holding mine. Why do you take pictures of things that are broken?
Son.
I finally found my voice. I don't think they're broken, I said, taking a step closer. I think they're honest. Most people spend their whole lives hiding the cracks. But the cracks are where the light gets in. It's how you know something is real. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything we weren't saying. The contract. Her father. My gallery show. All of it felt small and insignificant compared to this. This one moment of realness. She stood up, placing the tablet carefully on the coffee table. She was closer now. Close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of blue in her gray eyes. Close enough that I could smell the faint scent of rain on her skin. She didn't look like the governor's daughter. She just looked like Aveline. My father's favorite photo of me, she said, her voice low and laced with a bitterness that startled me, is from when I was 10. I just won a national equestrian competition. I'm holding a giant trophy, smiling for the camera. Perfect. She paused, her eyes never leaving mine. I hated riding. The horse had thrown me the day before. I had a fractured wrist under my jacket, but I smiled, because that's what I was taught to do. She took one more step. We were inches apart. The carefully drawn lines of our contract blurred into nothing. No one, she said, her voice cracking just lightly, has ever said they liked my cracks before. The contract had rules. Neat lines and numbered clauses designed to keep us separate. Her world and mine. The performance and the reality. But after that night, after the photographs, the lines blurred. The rules felt flimsy. The performance felt like a lie in a way it hadn't before. Before, I was playing a part. Now, I was pretending I didn't feel the way she looked at me. And that was a much harder role to play. The air in the green room was stale. It smelled of cold coffee and nervous sweat. Through the door, I could hear the roar of the crowd. 10,000 people waiting for Governor Hayes to speak. Waiting for us. Aveline was standing by the door, her back to me. She was in a sapphire blue dress. The color of power. Her shoulders were straight, her posture perfect. The fortress was back, but I could see the tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. I noticed things now. I noticed everything. Since the night with the photographs, something had shifted. The silences between us were no longer empty. They were charged. The brief, necessary touches required by our contract lingered a second too long. A hand on the small of my back. Fingers brushing as we passed a coffee cup. Each touch was a question neither of us dared to answer. Arthur Vance bustled into the room, a clipboard in his hand. His eyes darted between us, a flicker of something I couldn't read. Suspicion? 5 minutes, he announced. Aveline, you'll join your father on stage after his introduction. Cassia, you'll be front row, camera ready.
He turned to me.
And tonight, he said, his voice low, we need something more. The polls are tight. The family values voters need to see it. We need the kiss. My blood ran cold. It was on the schedule. Event 4B, the victory kiss. Choreographed. Rehearsed. A simple press of lips to her cheek after the speech. Clinical. Safe. But now the thought of it made my stomach twist. Aveline turned from the door. Her face was pale. Arthur, she said, her voice tight, perhaps we reconsider. No. Vance cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's happening. Don't mess this up, Aveline. He shot me a look. Either of you. And then he was gone. The silence he left behind was suffocating. She stood there, frozen. A statue carved from ice. I knew this look. This was the little girl with the fractured wrist, smiling for the camera. Hey, I said, my voice softer than I intended.
She didn't look at me.
I walked over to her, stopping a few feet away. Ava, I said. I had never used her first name without the cameras on. Her head snapped up. Her gray eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying vulnerability. I can't do it, Cass, she whispered, the sound raw. I can't go out there and perform. Not tonight. Not with you. The words hung between us. Not with you. Because it wasn't a performance anymore. Then don't. I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't perform. I took a step closer, breaking another dozen unspoken rules. Forget the crowd. Forget the cameras. Forget Vance. I reached out, my hand hovering in the air between us for a moment before I dared to touch her. I gently took her trembling hand in mine. Her fingers were like ice. Just find me, I whispered. When you're out there, just look for me. I'll be there. And it'll just be us. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something. Permission? Strength? An escape? The door opened. It was Vance's assistant. It's time. She had to go. She pulled her hand away, the loss of her touch a sudden ache. As she reached the door, she paused. She looked back at me, just for a second, and she nodded. A tiny, almost imperceptible dip of her chin. It was a promise. I sat in the front row, a fake smile plastered on my face. On stage, Aveline was a vision in blue, standing beside her father as he spoke. She was perfect.
Poised.
A politician's daughter. To everyone else, she looked serene. But I saw it. The way she held her hands. The tension in her jaw. I saw the cracks. The governor finished his speech. The crowd erupted. This was it. The moment. Aveline stepped forward. Her father hugged her, then turned to wave at the crowd. She walked to the edge of the stage, and her eyes found mine. In the chaos of 10,000 people, camera flashes, and falling confetti, her gaze locked onto me. The world fell away. It was just us. She held my gaze as she turned, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time all night. Her father, seeing his cue, moved in for the family photo op. He kissed her on one cheek. And then, as per the script, she was supposed to turn and blow a kiss to the crowd. But she didn't.
She kept looking at me.
And with the eyes of the world on her, she brought her fingers to her own lips, then extended her hand, not to the crowd, but directly, unmistakably, to me. A gesture so intimate, so personal, so far off script. It felt more real than any kiss. In the front row, I could feel Arthur Vance's rage radiating like heat. But I didn't care. All I could do was smile. A real smile. Because I knew she wasn't performing for them anymore.
She was speaking to me.
There are two kinds of silence. The quiet peace that settles after a storm has passed. And the dead, heavy stillness before it breaks. The moment we stepped off that elevator and into the penthouse, I knew which one this was. The air was thick with unspoken words. The energy from the rally, from her act of defiance, from the silent promise she'd made me in front of 10,000 people, it was all still buzzing under my skin. But in her apartment, the performance was over, and the reckoning was about to begin. Aveline didn't turn on the lights. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette against the glittering expanse of the city at night. I stayed by the door, my heart a slow, heavy drum in my chest. I expected shouting. Accusations. From her? From me? I wasn't sure. Instead, there was just this wait. He's furious, she said, her voice flat. She didn't have to say who he was. Arthur called me the entire ride home. Then my father. What did they say? I asked, my own voice a whisper. She laughed. A short, bitter sound with no humor in it. What do you think? Irresponsible. Reckless. Jeopardizing the campaign. Arthur wants you fired. My stomach dropped.
Of course he did.
I was the variable he couldn't control. And what do you want? I asked, the question hanging in the dark between us. She turned from the window. Even in the dim light, I could see the exhaustion etched on her face. But there was something else there too. A flicker of steel I hadn't seen before. He can't fire you, she said simply. Ava, the contract. The contract, she cut me off, taking a step forward, is between you and me. Arthur just arranged the paperwork. He doesn't have the authority. She was defending me, not as a prop, not as an employee, but as something else. Why did you do it? Asked, needing to understand. On stage. That wasn't the plan. She came closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. You told me not to perform, she said, her voice soft. You told me to find you.
So I did.
She hesitated, searching for the words. I spoke the only language I could. And I understood. It was a message. A signal fire in the dark. An act of translation. The silence that followed was different. The storm had broken. This was the quiet after. And in that quiet, a new sound. Her phone, buzzing angrily on the marble entryway table. The screen lit up. Arthur Vance. We both looked at it. That insistent, demanding buzz. Her old life, her old cage, calling her back. She looked from the phone to me. Her gray eyes were clear. Decisive. She walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine. The brief touch was a spark in the dark. She picked up the phone. And she hit decline. He can wait, she said, her voice firm. She turned to face me, a new resolve in her eyes. I've spent my entire life doing what I was told. Smiling when I was told to smile. Speaking when I was given a script. Tonight, for the first time, I felt like I was writing my own lines. She took a deep breath. This arrangement, she said, gesturing around the vast, empty apartment. This performance. It started as a cage, a way to control a narrative. But with you, her voice trailed off. With you, she started again, stronger this time. It feels less like a contract and more like a collaboration. My breath hitched. A collaboration. Partners. She closed the small remaining distance between us. Her hand came up, not to my cheek, but to my arm, her fingers gently tracing the sleeve of my jacket. It wasn't a public gesture. It wasn't on a call sheet. It was just for us. The deal was 30 days, she said, her eyes searching mine. To get through the election. She paused. What happens on day 31, Cass? The question wasn't about the contract. It wasn't about the money. It was about us. And for the first time, I didn't have a photograph. I didn't have an answer. Every campaign has a war room. A place with maps and strategies and contingency plans. A place where you learn your enemy's weaknesses, so you can exploit them. But our war room wasn't a room at all. It was the floor of Aveline's penthouse. The maps were my photographs. The strategy was her memory. And the enemy was her own life. The question of day 31 still hung in the air between us. But first, we had to survive until day 30. "He'll come at you through me," I said. We were on the floor, surrounded by a sea of my photographs and Aveline's campaign binders. A half-empty bottle of wine sat between us. The midnight sky glittered outside the windows. "Arthur's playbook is predictable," I continued, tapping a photo of Aveline's father. "He can't discredit you directly, so he'll try to prove I'm an unsuitable partner.
He'll dig."
Aveline nodded, her expression serious. The Ice Queen was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused strategist. "He'll start with your finances," she said, her voice crisp. "Your photography. Your family." And so it began. Our own private dossier. I told her everything. About the mountain of student debt. About the freelance jobs I took just to make rent, corporate headshots, bland product photography, soulless work that paid the bills but chipped away at my spirit. About the small town I ran from as soon as I could. A place where everyone knew your business and different was a four-letter word. About my last serious relationship, how it ended in a screaming match over a gallery show I couldn't afford and a future she couldn't wait for. I laid my life out on the floor for her, all the messy, unglamorous, vulnerable parts. I expected her to see the liability, the political risk, but she didn't. She listened. She asked questions. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw not a liability but a person. "This gallery show," she said, her finger tracing the edge of a print. "Tell me about it." And so I did. I told her about my dream, a collection of portraits called Honest Faces. Real people, no filters, no masks. The project I'd been pouring my soul into for years. The reason I'd taken this godforsaken job in the first place. When I finished, the apartment was quiet again. She was looking at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Now you," I said, my voice soft. "He'll use your past against us, too. The real past, not the approved anecdotes. We need to know where the landmines are." She took a deep breath, and she began to talk. She told me about the approved boyfriend, the senator's son who had a wandering eye that the campaign PR team had to constantly clean up after. She told me about her semester abroad in Florence, the one happy, anonymous time in her life, and the friendship with her art history classmate, Sophia, that became too intense, too real, and had to be quietly ended when her father found out. She spoke of the crushing weight of expectation, the loneliness, the constant performance. Her life laid bare next to mine. Two different worlds, same cage. "Jenna Slate," I said, changing tactics. "The reporter. She's the real threat, not Arthur. She's smart. She saw the cracks. What do we know about her?" Aveline's eyes lit up with a cold fire. "I know," she said. She pulled her laptop over. "Jenna Slate made her name exposing a financial scandal in a company my father's rival was invested in. She's tenacious. But her weakness," Aveline typed furiously, "is her ambition. She wants a story so badly, she sometimes misses the real story right in front of her." She pulled up an article, a scathing exposé.
And I saw it.
A detail Jenna had gotten wrong. A small but crucial error in her reporting that had been corrected in a tiny footnote 2 weeks later. A chink in the armor. "If she comes at us again," Aveline said, her voice low and dangerous, "we don't just defend. We discredit. We feed her a different story. One that's more dramatic, more scandalous, but ultimately a dead end. We make her waste her time." I looked at her in awe. The politician's daughter. She'd been in a war room her whole life. We worked for hours, sharing stories, finding weaknesses, building a defense. Sometime after 3 a.m., I fell silent, looking at the chaos around us. My photos, her binders, 2 empty wine glasses, our lives, tangled together on her penthouse floor. "What?" she asked, noticing my silence. "This is the most honest I've been with anyone in years," I admitted, my voice thick with exhaustion and wine. She met my gaze across the scattered papers. Her expression was soft, unguarded. "Me too," she whispered. The air shifted. The strategy session was over. The war room dissolved, leaving just two women, sitting on the floor in the middle of the night. Closer than we'd ever been. She started to lean in. A slow, deliberate movement. My heart stopped. This wasn't on a call sheet. This wasn't for the cameras. This was for us. The human body has 1,000 tells. A liar's pulse. A fighter's stance. A lover's gaze. I'd spent my life learning to read them in other people. But after that night on the floor, after she leaned in and the world stopped for a single, breath-held second, I became terrifyingly aware of my own. The way my breath would catch when she entered a room. The way the hairs on my arm would stand up when she brushed past me. The way my heart had developed a tell of its own. A frantic, 3-beat rhythm that only hammered against my ribs when she was near. Aveline.
Aveline.
The event was a fundraiser at a private gallery in Soho. It was our first public outing since the war room. Since the moment she almost kissed me. She didn't in the end. My phone had buzzed with a low battery warning. A stupid, mundane sound that shattered the spell. She pulled back. I breathed again. We called it a night. But the question of that kiss still hung in the air between us, a tangible thing. Now we were back on duty. The contract was the contract. Deep breaths, Ryder. Aveline murmured beside me, her voice a low vibration only I could hear. She was looking at a large abstract painting, but her focus was entirely on me. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. Not a fan of modern art, I whispered back, playing my part. Liar, she said, a tiny smile playing on her lips. You told me last night you love Rothko. You just hate the crowds. She remembered. From our 3 a.m. confession session. A tiny detail I'd thrown away, and she had caught it and kept it. My heart did its stupid 3-beat rhythm. Aveline. This was our new dynamic. A quiet, constant conversation happening just beneath the surface of our public performance. She'd point out a detail in a painting she knew I'd appreciate. I'd subtly guide her away from a donor I knew from my research was problematic. We were a team. Her hand found mine. This time it wasn't for the cameras. There were no cameras here. Not yet. Her fingers intertwined with mine. A natural, easy fit. Her skin was warm. The gesture was simple. Grounding. It said, I'm here. We're in this together. Arthur's in year 6, I murmured, squeezing her hand once. Our new signal. And Jenna Slade is by the bar. She squeezed back twice. I see her.
Stay calm.
We moved through the room as one entity. It was effortless. A dance we hadn't rehearsed, but somehow both knew the steps too. We were good. Too good. We were standing by a sculpture when Aveline's mother found us. Aveline Hayes was a woman carved from porcelain and political ambition. Her smile was a weapon. Aveline, darling, she said, her eyes sweeping over me with a cool, dismissive appraisal. And, Cassia. Mother, Aveline said, her voice instantly losing its warmth. The fortress was back, walls going up. I just spoke with Arthur, Catherine continued, ignoring me completely. He's concerned. This little collaboration of yours has him worried. You were reckless at the rally. I was honest, Aveline said, her voice steely. Catherine laughed, a brittle sound. Honesty is for diaries, darling, not for campaigns. Your father needs you focused. This is not the time for distractions. Her gaze flickered to me, and the meaning was clear. I was the distraction. I felt Aveline tense beside me. Her hand, still in mine, tightened almost painfully. I saw her preparing for battle, about to defend me, to fight a war on a front we hadn't planned for. Before she could speak, I squeezed her hand 3 times. Let me handle this. I turned to her mother, extending my free hand, my smile polite and unwavering. It's a pleasure to finally meet you properly, Mrs. Hayes, I said, my voice warm. Ava speaks of you so often. I used her pet name. A deliberate intimacy. A claim. She told me how you two used to visit this very gallery when she was a girl. I continued, weaving a lie from a thread of truth Ava had given me. Her fingers intertwined with mine. A natural, easy fit. Her skin was warm. The gesture was simple.
Grounding.
It said, I'm here. We're in this together. Arthur's in year 6, I murmured, squeezing her hand once. Our new signal. And Jenna Slade is by the bar. She squeezed back twice. I see her.
Stay calm.
We moved through the room as one entity. It was effortless. A dance we hadn't rehearsed, but somehow both knew the steps too. We were good. Too good. We were standing by a sculpture when Aveline's mother found us. Catherine Hayes was a woman carved from porcelain and political ambition. Her smile was a weapon. Aveline, darling, she said, her eyes sweeping over me with a cool, dismissive appraisal. And, Cassia. Mother, Aveline said, her voice instantly losing its warmth. The fortress was back, walls going up. I just spoke with Arthur, Catherine continued, ignoring me completely. He's concerned. This little collaboration of yours has him worried. You were reckless at the rally. I was honest, Aveline said, her voice steely. Catherine laughed, a brittle sound. Honesty is for diaries, darling, not for campaigns. Your father needs you focused. This is not the time for distractions. Her gaze flickered to me, and the meaning was clear. I was the distraction. I felt Aveline tense beside me. Her hand, still in mine, tightened almost painfully. I saw her preparing for battle, about to defend me, to fight a war on a front we hadn't planned for. Before she could speak, I squeezed her hand 3 times. Let me handle this. I turned to her mother, extending my free hand, my smile polite and unwavering. It's a pleasure to finally meet you properly, Mrs. Hayes, I said, my voice warm. Ava speaks of you so often. I used her pet name, a deliberate intimacy, a claim. She told me how you two used to visit this very gallery when she was a girl. I continued, weaving a lie from a thread of truth Ava had given me. She said it's where she got her eye for art. Catherine was taken aback. Her polished facade had a momentary crack. This wasn't in her script. Aveline has one of the most incredible eyes for detail I've ever known, I said, my gaze shifting to Ava, now filled with genuine adoration. She sees the truth in things. It's one of the first things I fell in love with about her. I looked back at her mother. You must be so proud. Checkmate. What could she say? I had used their own weapons, family, sentiment, public perception, against her. Catherine Hayes stared at me for a long, silent moment. The porcelain mask was back in place. Indeed, she said finally, her voice tight. She gave a curt nod and swept away. The moment she was gone, Aveline let out a breath she'd been holding. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and awe. Where did you learn to do that? She whispered. I notice things, I whispered back, a smile playing on my lips. She looked down at our joined hands, then back up at me. The air grew thick again. That familiar, charged energy crackled between us. The party, the people, the art, it all faded away. This time, when she leaned in, there was no hesitation. Her eyes searched mine, asking a silent question. My heart hammered its rhythm.
Aveline. Aveline.
And I knew my own eyes were giving her the answer. A photographer knows about liminal space, the place between one moment and the next. A doorway, a sunset, a held breath. It's the space where everything is possible and nothing has happened yet. In the gallery, with her eyes asking a question and my heart hammering the answer, we were suspended in that space. For a single, infinite second. Then her name was called. A donor needed a photo. The moment was broken. The breath was released. The possibility vanished. But the feeling followed us home. The ride home was silent. Not the tense, angry silence of the beginning. Not the charged, strategic silence of the war room. This was a new silence. A heavy, trembling thing, full of the ghost of what almost happened in the gallery. I stood in the entryway of the penthouse, my hand on the doorknob. The contract stated my duties ended the moment we were behind locked doors. I was supposed to leave. Go back to my own apartment. My own life. Cass. Her voice stopped me. It was quiet. Fragile. I turned. She stood in the middle of the vast, dark living room, still in her elegant dress. The city lights behind her created a halo, turning her into a silhouette. The same silhouette from my photograph. The lonely figure in the window. Don't go, she said. It wasn't a command. It wasn't part of the job. It was a plea. My hand fell away from the door. I walked toward her, my footsteps echoing softly in the cavernous room. I stopped a few feet away, in our now familiar space of unspoken things. What you did tonight, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. With my mother.
No one has ever stood up for me like that.
Not even me. We're a team, remember? I said, my own voice husky. No, she said, shaking her head slowly. It was more than that. You saw her coming, and you protected me. You used her own world against her. She looked up, her eyes shining in the dim light. You saw me. I took a breath. I always see you, Ava. That was it. The final wall crumbled. The last defense fell. She closed the distance between us in 2 quick steps. This time, there was no hesitation. No almost. Her hands came up to frame my face, her touch gentle but firm. Her skin was cool. Her thumbs traced my cheekbones, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver down my spine. My own hands found her waist, instinctively pulling her closer. The fabric of her dress was smooth beneath my fingers. I could feel the frantic, unsteady rhythm of her heart matching my own. Is this in the contract? She whispered, her voice trembling, her breath ghosting across my lips. No, I whispered back. Nothing about this is in the contract. Her eyes held mine for one last searching second, asking for permission, giving it, and then she kissed me. It was nothing like the choreographed moments for the cameras. There was no performance.
No posing.
This was hesitant then hungry, searching then sure. It was a question and an answer all at once. It tasted of expensive wine and a truth held back for far too long. It was the lonely girl in the window and the photographer who saw her. It was the quiet understanding on the penthouse floor and the defiant stand in the art gallery. It was everything we hadn't been allowed to say, finally spoken in a language that needed no words. My hand moved from her waist, up her back, tangling in the soft hair at the nape of her neck. A soft sound escaped her throat, a sigh of surrender that I felt more than heard. She deepened the kiss, her body pressing against mine. This wasn't a victory kiss. This wasn't a candid shot. This was a threshold, and we had just crossed it, together. I woke up to the smell of coffee, and the unfamiliar weight of a cashmere blanket. I wasn't in my own apartment. My bed wasn't a sprawling sofa in a penthouse overlooking the city, and the silence wasn't lonely. I had a rule, never stay the night. It was a holdover from a past I didn't like to think about, a way to keep my heart neat, my life compartmentalized. But last night with Aveline, after that kiss, after the world had narrowed to just the two of us, leaving wasn't an option. It would have felt like walking away from a part of myself. I sat up, the blanket pooling around my waist. I was still in my clothes from the night before. The elegant dress felt like a costume from another life. The first rays of dawn were painting the city in shades of pink and gold. I saw her then. She was standing by the kitchen island, her back to me. She'd changed out of her gown into a simple gray sweatshirt and leggings. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot at the nape of her neck. She looked normal, human, and more beautiful than I had ever seen her. My heart did a nervous flip. This was the moment. The awkward morning after dance. The part where one of us would say it was a mistake, a product of wine and exhaustion. The part where the contract would snap back into place like a rubber band. She must have heard me move. She turned, a coffee mug in her hand. A faint blush rose on her cheeks when she saw I was awake. Aveline Hayes, blushing. Good morning, she said, her voice soft. Morning, I managed, my own voice rough with sleep. She held up the mug. Coffee. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She brought it over, her movements slightly hesitant. This was new territory for both of us. Uncharted. No scripts. No call sheets. She handed me the mug. Our fingers brushed. That familiar jolt. But this time, neither of us pulled away. She didn't sit on the other end of the sofa. She sat on the coffee table, facing me, her knees almost touching mine, creating a small, intimate island for just the two of us in her vast, empty living room. We drank our coffee in a comfortable silence. The silence of two people who had shared something important and didn't need to fill the air with noise. "I don't do this," she said finally, her gaze fixed on her mug. "What?" I asked. "Make coffee for your fake girlfriend?" It was meant to be a joke, to lighten the mood. But it came out wrong. It brought the contract back into the room. She looked up, and her expression was serious.
Pained.
"No," she said. "Let people in. Let them stay." My breath caught.
Oh.
"Me neither," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper.
We just looked at each other then.
Two professional secret keepers. Two women who had built fortresses around their hearts. And we had somehow, impossibly, found a way into each other's. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. We both glanced over. His screen was visible from where we sat. "Arthur Vance, we need to talk about your Cassia problem."
Today.
The real world intruding. The bubble popped. I saw the familiar tension creep back into her shoulders. The mask beginning to reform. "I should go," I said, starting to stand up. "You have to deal with that."
No.
Her hand shot out, her fingers wrapping around my wrist. Her grip was firm. An anchor. "Don't," she said, her eyes pleading.
Please.
"Not yet." She pulled me back down. "He thinks you're the problem, Cass," she said, her voice urgent. "He doesn't get it." She took a deep breath. "You're not the problem. You're the solution." She let go of my wrist and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. "My father is announcing his final campaign tour this week. A 10-day trip through the state. Whistle stops, rallies, photo ops. Arthur wants me there. Alone. To put me back in my box, I finished for her, understanding completely. "Yes," she said, her grip tightening. "And I'm not going to do it. We're a team, remember? But that means it's going to get ugly. He's going to come after you. Hard." She looked me straight in the eye. The Ice Queen, the strategist, the warrior was back. But this time, she was fighting for me. "Are you ready for that?" she asked. The easy answer was no. My sensible, self-protective brain was screaming at me to run. This was a political war, and I was a civilian about to be caught in the crossfire. This wasn't my fight. But I looked at her. At the woman holding my hand like a lifeline. The woman who felt like a lonely silhouette in a window. The woman who blushed when she saw me in the morning. And I knew. It wasn't my fight. It was our fight. "Let him come," I said. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. It was the first real, unguarded smile I'd ever seen from her. And it was like watching the sun rise. Every contract has an end date. A final clause. A line where the obligations cease, and the parties go their separate ways. For 30 days, my life had been governed by one. A performance.
A lie.
A gilded cage. But it had also become real. Today was Election Day. The end of the campaign. The end of the war. The end of the contract. Tonight, we would find out if her father won. And I would find out if I lost her. The ballroom smelled of stale champagne and desperation. A giant screen on the wall showed a map of the state, a patchwork of red and blue. The race was too close to call. I stood in the wings, just off stage, the official family and staff zone. Aveline was a few feet away, standing beside her mother. She was wearing a stunning white dress, a symbol of victory, or surrender. She looked like a porcelain doll, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. For the last 10 days, we had been at war. Arthur Vance had thrown everything at me. Leaks to the press about my student debt. Insinuations about my radical art. A whisper campaign designed to paint me as an unstable, opportunistic fraud. But we were ready. For every attack, we had a countermove. A pre-planned deflection. A story we fed to Jenna Slate that sent her chasing ghosts. We worked as one. A silent, seamless team. But in the quiet moments, in the hotel rooms after the rallies, it was different. We never spoke of the contract. We never spoke of Day 31. It was an unspoken rule. A fragile truce. We existed only in the now. A bubble of borrowed time, knowing that the moment the polls closed, it would pop. Aveline caught my eye from across the space. Her mask didn't slip, but her eyes were screaming. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A warning. A plea. Not yet. Arthur Vance appeared at my elbow, his face pale and slick with sweat. The exit polls are bad, he hissed. We're losing the suburban women. They think he's too cold, too ambitious. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a venomous fury. This is your fault, he spat. Your chaos. This whole sordid affair. Before I could respond, a roar went through the crowd. On the screen, a new county turned blue. Her father's color. He was pulling ahead. Vance was gone, swallowed by a wave of cheering staffers. The energy in the room shifted. Hope, sharp and dangerous, filled the air. An hour later, it was over. The screen flashed. Projected winner, Governor Hayes. The world exploded in light and sound. I watched as Aveline was engulfed by her family. Her father, the senator-elect, hugged her, his face a mask of triumph. Her mother kissed her cheek. Arthur Vance clapped her on the back. She was their victory prize, their perfect daughter. And she was a million miles away from me. I saw her look for me over her father's shoulder. Her eyes were lost. This was it. The contract was fulfilled. My job was done. The bubble had popped. I turned and walked away, slipping out a side door, away from the noise and the victory. My heart felt like a hollow, aching thing in my chest. I'd done my job. I'd gotten her through it. I'd won the battle. And lost the war. I was back in my hotel room, the one the campaign had paid for. For the last time, my bag was already packed. There was a check on the desk. The final payment. Enough to fund my gallery show 10 times over. It felt like blood money. I picked up my bag, my hand on the doorknob, and the door flew open. Aveline stood there, breathless, her white dress a stark contrast to the dim hallway. Her hair was a mess, her face streaked with tears. You weren't supposed to leave, she said, her voice choked with emotion. The job is over, Ava, I said, my own voice breaking. You won. No, she said, shaking her head, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. No, he won. His ambition won. His campaign won. I was just the price. She walked toward me, her eyes blazing. For 30 days I have lived inside a contract. A performance. A performance. But the realest moments of my life, the only real moments, have been with you. She stopped in front of me. The girl on the floor with the photographs. The girl who stood up to my mother. The girl who held my hand in the dark and told me to be brave. That's who I don't want to lose. Tears streamed down her face now. The contract is over, Cass. The NDA has expired. But I'm still here. She took a shuddering breath. So this is it.
No cameras. No crowds.
No contract. Just me, Aveline, asking you what happens now.
She was giving me a choice.
The safe path, take the money, get my dream, and walk away. Or the terrifying one. The one with no map and no guarantees. The one with her. I dropped my bag. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with my thumb. Day 31, I said softly. A flicker of hope, bright and beautiful, ignited in her eyes. Day 31, she whispered back, a question and a prayer. I leaned in and kissed her. Not a performance. Not a rebellion. A promise. It's the first day of the rest of our lives, I said. If you want it to be. Her answer was not in words. It was in the way she kissed me back, a desperate, joyful claiming. It was in the way her arms wrapped around my neck, holding on like she would never let go. The election was over. But our story, our real story, was just beginning. The contract is over. The story begins. Thank you for listening to the Midnight Love Audio.
This is not the end.
It's just the end of the beginning. And if you want to be a part of what happens between the seasons, the private moments, the challenges of a real relationship in the public eye, and exclusive bonus stories, our Patreon is where our community lives and breathes love scenes we can't post on YouTube, so join us there. The story never truly ends there.